Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Disruptors for Good podcast. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Lindsay Hadley, founder and CEO of Harbor Fund, a nonprofit using philanthropic capital to finance impact Hollywood films. Harbor Fund operates through an evergreen model. Philanthropists donate to the fund, Harbor invests in socially relevant films, and any financial returns are reinvested into future projects. Lindsay brings more than 2 decades of experience in nonprofit fundraising, impact campaigns, and filmmaking. In this conversation, we explore how Harbor Fund is rethinking film finance, why powerful stories can shape culture and influence behavior, and what the organization looks for when deciding which films to support. We also discuss the challenges facing independent film, the role of commercial viability in creating impact, and Lindsay's ambitious vision to build one of the most influential sources of capital for social impact storytelling. Here's my conversation with Lindsay Hadley, founder and CEO of Harbor Fund.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining me today. Really excited to talk about Harbor Fund. When I discovered it, I was infatuated by the model that you've created and built out, and obviously entertainment is something everybody loves. It's a lot like music, so everybody kind of has a bond to it in a way. So before we talk about Harbor Fund, talk a little bit about your journey. What was that journey like for you, and maybe the aha moment and the catalyst that made you want to start Harbor.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Grant. And it's a privilege to talk about what we're doing at Harbor Fund, as it is, something I'm so deeply passionate about and throwing my whole life into. Um, it was at a lunch, and Viola Davis was receiving an award from Variety and Faith in Media, and I'll never forget her speech. She said something really beautiful. She said, the two most important moments of a person's life is the day they're born, and then the day they find out why. And I really feel like I found out my why with Harbor. And essentially, my background was for decades, I was a consultant in the nonprofit sector, and I raised money and produced large scale campaigns and events for causes that I cared about. And they were, in different verticals of social good, but all of them trying to diminish human suffering and make the world better in some way. So whether it's ending extreme poverty or addressing, issues of vulnerable children and how to care for them better, or climate change, or, animal rights, whatever it may be, we were addressing different societal ills and trying to make the world a better place. And I did that for 20 years and raised over $100 million for my clients, and my campaigns and events, in some instances, leveraged billions of dollars for issues that I cared about. And we were like a jack of all trade, master of none little boutique agency called Hadley Impact Consulting. And our clients included A-list celebrities and ultra high net worth family offices and high profile individuals and captains of industry and multinational corporations and NGOs. And I really got a lot of experience in kind of being like a special forces team for
Mm.
good. And that is now culminating in one great whole at Harbor Fund. And what Harbor Fund is it's the first of its kind venture capital shaped film fund that is a 501(c)(3). And so how it works is philanthropists donate to the fund. We then invest and take an equity position in films, pari passu with the terms of the cap table of each film. So we're for-profit investors. Like, we expect a return and hope for a return. And these projects are all social good in nature. These are the Blood Diamonds or Schindler's List or Hotel Rwanda's or Love on the Spectrums of Tomorrow. We invest in them, and then if there's a return, the money comes back into the fund and then is redistributed and reinvested into future films. So it's this perpetual evergreen war chest for storytelling. That's what we built at Harbor, and we started 2 years ago. And we've invested now in 22 films and raised $15 million. About 12 million directly into the fund, and then a couple million have also gone into direct deals where investors have directly invested and we came on as producers for. But, to have helped get 22 films funding and to be out in the wild, we're going to have about 6 of them this year, this
Wow.
last quarter. We're really excited. And we have some of the biggest names in entertainment industry on our board, and we're investing in some of the most successful filmmakers and A-list talent on earth when it comes to storytelling, like masters of their craft. And we're just so excited that the proof of concept is working and we're getting it out there. And you asked, like, what was the impetus of the aha moment? And it was actually that I started making films a few years ago. I executive produced my first documentary, starring Ed Norton, called Uncharitable, and Stephen Gyllenhaal. Maggie and Jake's dad was our director. And I leveraged $1.5 million in donations to make this doc. And people have been doing that since before you and I were born, Grant. They've been like taking philanthropic dollars and making docs. And after we made the film, I started producing a second film that'll be out this year called Orphan Myth. And I produced and executive produced that one. And I started again raising philanthropic dollars, being as how that's my background is fundraising and charity. And along the way, the film came out and it didn't get seen by as many people as I'd hoped. And I realized very quickly that documentaries just aren't as ubiquitous. They're not as viewed as scripted narrative film with A-list actors. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, Blood Diamond did more than all the documentaries combined for
Right.
ethical supply chain issues or whatever it may be. I started thinking about these scripted films that really changed the world. And I started thinking maybe there's a new thought. Maybe we could leverage philanthropic dollars for actual scripted narrative films. And so I did that. I leveraged money for the first time in my career for a scripted film that'll be out this year called Flash Before the Bang that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck executive produced with myself and others. And it's a true story of a high school running team in the 1980s that won state championship in running, and they were deaf. So it's like Coda meets
Huh.
Chariots of Fire.
Yeah.
And it's called Flash Before the Bang because the deaf community, they can't hear the gunshot to start the race, but they could see the flash, and the flash goes a split second quicker than the sound, right? So anyway, the movie is going to be out this year. It is the most differently abled cast and crew in cinematic history. The director's deaf, the lead producer's deaf, the scriptwriter's deaf, all 28 actors on set that are deaf in real life.
Wow.
And so it's a very much about us by us film. And I was able to leverage a significant portion of the philanthropic budget of the overall production budget from philanthropists. And so that precedent was like, well, if they'll do it, why don't we just build this at scale through a fund? And I looked at the Acumen Fund, which was started by a woman named Jackie
Yep.
Novogratz.
I had
That's
her on. She's amazing.
you
But
did?
yeah,
She's amazing.
yeah.
She's one of my heroes. And I've had an immense privilege to meet her. And I hope to do more with her because I'm such a fan of her work. But we stand on the shoulders of giants of people like her and Jeff Skoll. And we just ideated and brought that vertical, that same strategy she did in social impact investing, we brought it to the entertainment industry. And so, yeah, we're now 2 years in and getting going, and we're going to try to raise 100 million in the next 2 years and really put us in the top 1% of independent film financing.
So it sounded like maybe early on the documentary, the Harbor Fund maybe did that whole thing, maybe quote not by itself, but like that was sort of a Harbor Fund project. Whereas now it's like a venture fund. You're just putting some money within the film, and then you sort of
Yeah.
step back, like as an
Yeah.
investor, or do you kind of involve more than just capital in a project?
It's a great question. Yes. So I personally produced and have produced, but Harbor Fund doesn't produce. We invest. I mean, we get producer credits for coming in with capital, and sometimes we help if really strategic ways. We bring talent. Sometimes we bring directors. We give notes to script. We do try to help to some development, but we're not a studio. Variety just came out with an article this week, and they titled it "Is Harbor Fund Participant 2.0?"
Mm,
And the answer that I had to that was no. We're different in that we're not a studio. So even though they would
mm,
have like a green book or they would have a Wonder or they'd have a Spotlight that was radically successful or Lincoln, these really
totally.
critically acclaimed, amazing, commercially
Amazing.
viable projects, it wasn't making up for the hemorrhage of the 100% overhead they had of a studio.
Gotcha.
And so it wasn't built sustainably, unfortunately, and that's why it went
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Our model is different in that if we have $1 billion in our fund one day, fingers crossed,
Sure.
all
I
the
see. I
prayers.
mean, it's
You
good.
know,
I feel
we
like it's gonna happen.
well, I love it. Let's go with that audacity. But we would never have more than 10 employees. It's a really lean
Yes.
venture capital structure.
Yes.
So we are built in a way that I think protects us from some of the liabilities we saw a participant with in terms of
Sure.
sustainability, I believe.
Sure. For my ignorance, how does a movie revenue work? Like on the back end, right? Like, so let's say, obviously it costs something to make a movie, it makes it in the box office, but then you have obviously streaming and all this stuff. It could be perpetual payments, or is it sort of a one lump sum back to the fund? I guess it's different,
Yeah,
all
it's a
kind of
great
different ways.
question. Every deal is different, right? It depends on how you structured the deal as an investor. So if you have in perpetuity revenue, generally that's the case, right? You share ongoing like royalties or so. If it goes, to streaming, it goes theatrical release and gets some money back. And then it goes to streaming, it gets some money back. Then maybe it gets relicensed in a different region of the world, or maybe it gets licensed in an educational context, or maybe that ends up on airplanes, or there's all kinds of
Sure.
like
Yeah.
revenue potential for it. Maybe the original IP gets now turned into like if you as we've seen with most of the Disney stuff, the repeat IP of like the original Lion King is now live action. I mean, there's all kinds of ongoing revenue that can come out of a film. Depends on the deal you structured, really. Sometimes you do like a loan with a cap of prime, or sometimes you do like P&A and it's like first money out, but you don't have as much upside. It just depends on the deal you do. But in general, yeah, you're like putting up the capital like any venture investor. And then the filmmakers, the actual producers make the product, put it out in the world, and realize potential, hopefully, your money back and then returns in perpetuity.
Each movie is almost treated like a company, almost like a SPV. It's almost like a
It's
special.
exactly like an SPV in a way. They're their own LLC
Gotcha.
with their own cap table and their own investors, and we take just a part of that, and we come in pari passu with those other investors.
When you first, I guess, pitched the idea to, we'll call it LPs or other
Donors
investors.
in our case. Yeah, in our case, they're donors. We don't have any
Yeah,
else.
that's what's so beautiful. But was that conversation difficult because it's such a new model? So there's also maybe an education involved in explaining. i- was that more difficult to get funding because it was such a unique model, or did you find it because your history, your background, your network?
I mean, fundraising is always hard. You have to have a combination of trust equity and building confidence, right, from donors. And you also have to have real there. A lot of it's relational in the beginning. When you don't have proof of concept, it's getting easier to fundraise, right? That's the beauty of startup and beauty of business is the more proof of concept and the more confidence you build in the marketplace, the more it's like a centrifuge of value. A lot of it was my 20-year career of building trust amongst these high net worth individuals and family offices and foundations, and leveraging that into this new thing, right? And going to them and being like, hey, I'm doing this thing and here's what I see. And they would be like, yeah, I see what you're doing. But a lot of it was new money. A lot of it was new relationships because I'm going to people that are calibrated to want to support, the film. Because really, like what we've created in this elegant model, I believe in a harbor is like a structure where philanthropists can be patrons of the arts and support filmmaking the way they've been able to support ballet or the museums of the arts, and you think of even university donors, or to use historically, I use the Medici's from Italy a lot and say they supported Michelangelo, who gave us all the Sistine Chapel. Now you can give us, Hotel Rwanda or Aaron Brockovich or Pay It Forward or these amazing movies. And that's the idea. So uh, people just got it. It feels kind of dumb smart. That was a phrase Mark Burnett, who's on our board, used. He was like, "Is this effing legal?" Was his first question to me. And I explained to him it is, and why, and explained Acumen Fund and other case studies. And he said, "Then why has no one done this? This is so dumb smart." And I think sometimes the best ideas are those that are common sense that are not common practice. And I think it's just an idea's time has come, essentially.
When you talk about films that come across your desk, and how do you choose? How do you and the team, is it you and the board is choose it? Do you just have a small committee? I guess, how do you choose it? What does that look like? Are you getting scripts like a movie studio would? I guess, how does that work?
Yes. Yes, we're inundated with pitches. Like for any filmmakers listening, like this might be really helpful so we don't waste their time or ours. Yeah, first of all, they need to have a social good element to them. So we're not making horror movies or entertainment. Like we wouldn't make Game of Thrones or Fast and Furious or a horror movie like that.
Mission
Just
Impossible, something like
not,
that.
yeah, not edifying. Yeah. Now, if it had a super entertaining thriller, component, but it had some social element, it was like historical or showed some incredible resilience or something that built a lot of empathy for a certain group of people, like that, we absolutely could look at that, right? So if you're addressing, I don't know, certain geopolitical issues that we want to speak into as philanthropists, and it has like a born identity motif, that's great. So it just depends. So it doesn't have to be like on the nose, donate now, but
Of
it
course.
could
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
Shawshank Redemption, it could be Dances with Wolves, whatever it is.
Children of
So
Men, my favorite movie.
yeah, those are my favorite. Yeah, such great movies. So ultimately, we're inundated with pitches. I mean, I think I get somewhere around 1,000 submissions, like probably a week through either a culmination of like DMs on my social,
That's insane.
LinkedIn, emails, or like our online portal. And so, I see a lot of filmmakers online grumpy, like, "Oh, you're working with all this A-list talent. What about us grassroots?" I'm like, "There are thousands of you." Like, I think having some self-awareness that we're working with the best filmmakers in the world for a reason, because we want this to be as impactful as possible and have the most commercial liability. And so, one of the things that we would say is like, if it doesn't have a social component, it's a non-starter. If it doesn't have A-list attached, we found that in our projects, unless because we match philanthropists with the projects, unless there's an A-lister attached, the philanthropists don't write a check.
Gotcha.
And I know that makes some of these small indie struggling filmmakers grumpy. It's like to make good enough script to get an A-lister attached. Like
Fair.
that's the onus is on you to cut through the insane competition that's out there in the creative landscape. And the reason why the philanthropists are writing a check when an A-lister is attached, some people get a little jaded and are like, "Oh, it's a bunch of star chasers." It's like, no, they're the best in the world at what they do. That's why they're world famous, because they're masters of their craft, and it builds donor confidence. The donors believe it'll be commercially viable, and it is more likely to be seen, be distributed, and be commercially viable and get funded if there's an A-lister attached. Everybody knows that it's because you're working with the best in the industry. So we kind of don't even look at stuff if there's not an A-lister attached, generally speaking, unless the IP is the A-lister. So we just recently came in on a project called the Telepathy Tapes, which is a documentary that'll be coming out next year. And it's based on a podcast that was the number one podcast in the world, beat Joe Rogan with 70 million, downloads. So like that we made an exception for because the impact is so outsized and the IP itself is such a premier, you know, star. But generally speaking, A-list attached and that A-lister will be willing to engage with us. So even if you have an A-lister attached, if they're not willing to like come to our events and work with our
Mhm.
benefactors and go to luncheons or salon events or we do this thing called the Harbor Film Forum, which is like this gathering of where there's pitches, the A-listers pitch to our philanthropists, and it's like adult summer camp meets a benevolent Shark Tank. It's really cool. And, if the talent's not willing to get engaged with our community, it's probably not a fit for us because we just haven't had success otherwise. So those are some things. So like immediately a bunch of filmmakers just trying to get, random money, like it probably won't be a success unless you have some of those components. But in those instances, when you have those components, we're super interested to look at it. But yeah, we get, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of scripts across my desk, and I have interns reading it, and we have AI helping us source like how good is this compared to these other projects we've invested in, and we're trying everything we can to like to
Keep
have
up
the
with
best
this.
ones
Yeah.
percolate up so that we read it. And then we have a board. You asked, like, so I am the CEO and predominantly have most of the relationships with all the fundraising and philanthropists. And I know how to match make pretty well. Like, oh gosh, they're gonna love this issue. They care about, what mental health. They have this family has 500 million pledged to mental health. This is a great mental health project. Let's
Totally.
match make. But our board, we have this incredible advisory board. We have Mark Burnett, Mark Cuban, Katie Couric, Jared Butler, Amy Redford, and Patty Jenkins, the director of Wonder Woman. I mean, we have all these incredible, premier advisory board members who help me make decisions. Like if it's going to be a live unscripted show, I'm going to call Mark Burnett, who's the greatest television producer in the modern era. And I asked him, "Do you think this is going to be a good bet?" Those are the kind of decision tree like support that we have.
Well, one of the things I was gonna ask if you still are you still doing documentaries, and you kinda answered that, and so
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I was just saying we are if the talent is attached. Docs are not doing great. They're not being acquired very often. They're not getting distribution like they used to, like unless they have a big audience. And so what we're finding is it's A-list celebrity produced docs. It's their baby.
still
So
gotta
like
be a name
Chris,
attached to it.
yeah, we're doing a doc with Chris Pine, for example, and
Mhm.
it's called Evicted, and it's based on a Pulitzer Prize winning incredible book about the affordable housing crisis in America and people being moved into homelessness and like the racket and some of the corruption that goes on and for the unhoused. And he got up on stage at our event at Sundance and also came to our Necker Island event and, in tears talked about his personal lived experience of being evicted as a child. You know what I mean? And that moved our philanthropist to write checks. And so we brought the first funding that he's been trying to get for years for his documentary came through Harbor. And so, we're still raising more for that project. So we do it on occasion, but we're trying to do more scripted.
Do you feel like social impact films, let's say, um, are having a bit of a moment because you can have a star attached to it? Like you said, with whether it's Chris Pine or look, pretty much every A-list celebrity has a cause, like,
Mhm.
that they
That's fair.
already sort of are an ambassador for, right? Or
Yeah,
give money to or something like that.
that's
But
right.
this this gives them an option to actually like add more than just capital, right? Like donate 100K or 50K to a nonprofit they support or show up at a gala or something like that, which is fine, already needed. But the opportunity to like visually showcase, in the evicted thing, a person's not gonna, unless they had that lived experience, you're not gonna be able to captivate that via anything else but actual like film and viewership to visually see it on a screen. So they have to be just gung ho about, being able to pitch these passion to somebody that speaks their language rather than them going to a studio, right? Or just pitching like a streamer this.
Mm.
It's to not have to have like honestly to have Harbor Fund attached to it almost sounds just as good as the A list at this point.
Well, that's so nice of you to say. I don't know about that yet, but that would be really cool one day if Harbor being attached gave some kind of indication of like maybe the quality of the impact it might have, or the quality of just kind of the intent behind what the film's about. That would be really cool if we get that kind of affinity. What an honor that'd be. Our prerogative is when you ask what is success to us. I mean, the commercial viability is a great indicator of success. It means a lot of people watch the film. So if it goes into theater, it was probably commercially viable enough that people thought it was worth the P&A or print and advertising to actually put it into a theater. That's a great indicator. And then, if it goes to streaming, how many views and how much revenue it all brought. All that kind of indicates like how much it's going to touch culture and how much it's going to change hearts and minds, which ultimately changes behavior, which is the point of what Harper's thesis of theory of change is, right? So, yeah, commercial viability is probably a huge indicator of how successful something could be an impact in theory in our thesis, because we're not, you know, like there was recently these very successful YouTubers that had these horror movies that were
Yeah,
so commercially successful,
yeah.
and that just because they're commercial value doesn't mean they were good social impact, right? So, but anything we're investing in would already have that built in as an assumption. So then how much money it made probably indicates how much reach it had. And so that's a great indicator for us.
This might be a silly question, but like more important is probably a really bad way to phrase this. Is there a special recipe of like why was Hotel Rwanda really successful? Why was Blood Diamond? I would even put maybe like Philadelphia in
Mm,
something like this.
so successful, yeah.
Was is it more of the cause maybe than the A-lister? Is it the other way? Like I'm trying to because like supply chain and diamonds, right? Not really top of mind of anybody, right? But Leo's in it, and now it's sort of at the forefront of like Hotel Rwanda. Nobody even know where Rwanda was, and then all of a sudden, it's this film depicts it, and it's sort of this out of nowhere hit. In Philadelphia, different with AIDS because a lot of people probably had some touch point to that. A lot like maybe like cancer is now it just touched so many lives that I
Mm.
guess I'm trying to search for like the cause that the movie is talking about. Is that maybe something you look at first versus the star attached to it? Does the cause have to be big enough just as much as like the A-lister for it to have that recipe of success maybe?
Yeah. I think really at the core of it, it's a great story. I actually think is what makes something successful. So the cause matters, but you can take something that no one cares about, like Blood Diamond. Nobody cared about having conflict free diamonds until this great story was told. And then a great story tends to attract the best talent. So it's like actually at its core, it's like a great script. Like what's a really incredible story? Then executing well upon that, right? It's this miracle and cacophony of good things coming together to make it the success. I actually think that's the point of Harbor is like, yes, there's cause du jour, there's moments in time, there's zeitgeist and culture of like, this is on deck right now, right? Like when Al Gore came out with Inconvenient Truth, right? Like nobody was talking about climate change until he brought that up. But it was something that was had demand signals and pain points of what was happening around us, right? And he hit that note early and made a compelling enough piece of content to convince people and change their thinking. He was able to tell a better story than people
Yeah,
had at that.
yeah.
Um, but when it comes to like scripted films, yeah, I mean, I love the movie Pay It Forward, for example, with Kevin Spacey. And I mean, that was the most nebulous, like kind of altruistic cause of just like being a good person. That's not like, it wasn't something that was like pertinent in culture at that time. I even think of like Ted Lasso as an amazing impact series.
Totally.
And the tagline is kindness has a comeback. So something as ubiquitous as it doesn't have to be like, wow, this is the most important topical issue of our day, or whatever, or this is the most atrocious thing happening in society, like human trafficking of children or something. It just is actually just about how well can you infuse these shared values that we want espoused in culture at Harbor. How well can you pack it, productize, and present it in an entertaining way so that it actually reaches the masses and touches culture?
You mentioned the Affleck and Damon film, and they did, I think, Artist Equity, is that their
Mhm,
studio now?
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
like, that's an interesting model, right? A new model. Harbor Fund is an interesting sort of new model. These different type of ways to sort of make movies now. Is the barrier to entry just lower? Obviously, they have brand recognition and they could get investors and things like that. Same on your side too, opposite side of the spectrum, but innovative models, right, within the movie industry that have not existed before. Do you see more and more of that being created?
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question. I don't know that it's lower barriers to entry. I actually think in some ways it's harder than ever because capital is drying up and distribution is drying up and the industry's kind of proverbially on fire. And literally, bless
Going through a
Hollywood.
transition, right?
Yeah, it's in a dying mode. Like what worked isn't working anymore. And so long gone are the days where someone can just come with a great idea and pitch a bunch of executives and get your movie greenlit. Like it's actually really difficult. Like Martin Scorsese reached out to us to help us find money for his film. Like, how is that possible? I mean, we like these projects that we're funding in yesteryear would have been gobbled up and had bidding wars, some of these, that we're putting money into. It's just the industry's struggling. It's in a downturn. It's, really difficult to get capital, really difficult to get distribution. It's a hard time to be doing it, but that's where the most innovation lies always, right?
But just like a venture fund, you can invest in 50 projects. You really only need one or two to do well.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
that hit base.
right. A couple portfolio makers, but we have a project coming out with them Thanksgiving called Hershey, and it's the true story of Milton Hershey, starring Alexander Daddaria. And it's basically the true story of Milton Hershey, the founder of Hershey Chocolates, and the impact.
Is that a documentary or is it
It's a narrative. It's
really?
scripted. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so, it'll be out Thanksgiving, and it's, the Herculean story of, like, the entrepreneur spirit and coming out, but it's about caring for vulnerable children. So, spoiler
Mm,
alert, he leaves his
sure.
dynastic founding shares to an orphanage, which ends up
Wow.
becoming the Hershey Foundation, which is a $26 billion endowment that supports, vulnerable children in education all over the world. So, who knew you could be having chocolate guilt-free, Grant? Isn't that fun?
Hey, well, chocolate is my number one guilty pleasure. Quite, quite fond of it. So this is excellent. Why not Valentine's Day release? Thanksgiving, just
It's a
family, just,
great question. Yeah, it just did.
sure,
Those
sure,
those are
sure.
primary. We should have Valentine was definitely one of the ones they were hoping for, but Thanksgiving family is 4 quadrant, like, family can go out together and watch it. It's
1000%,
feel
thousand
good
percent.
feel good movie, sweet movie.
Last question. You mentioned always end a little bit in the future. You sort of mentioned maybe $1 billion fund over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years.
I love it.
What are
I would
some of the
say if it
hey,
becomes
I
let's go.
if you're not thinking big, don't think at all.
Let's go.
I don't think it's insurmountable at all. But when you look at the next 5 to 10 years, what are some of the goals and successes you and the team would like to achieve?
Yeah, I think the size of the fund has a centrifuge of gravity that would be really powerful because then you're doing deal sizes that are really instrumental, and you actually get better deal flow and more studio backed and more support, and so it can be this like positive virtuous cycle. I really want to hit 100 million in the next 2 years because that'll put us in the top 1% of independent film financing and make us formidable. I think that you know, winning some Oscars in our portfolio would be really great. So to get peer validation like that. I think having really cool anecdotal evidence of impact through policy change, like Blood Diamond we spoke about. De Beers Mining changed their policies and their ethical supply chains completely transformed, lifting tens of millions of people out of human trafficking exploitative situations in sub-Saharan Africa because of a movie that Leo starred in, because it was so well done. There's an amazing case study that I love. I tell about a lot from stage when I speak, but which was the movie Lion with Dev Patel and Nicole Kidman. But that movie was seen by executives at UNICEF, which is, they're constantly caring for vulnerable children, and they changed their strategy and their programming, and actually made it so that they were trying to get kids out of institutional care or orphanages back to their families, because most orphans in the global south, 80% of them are economic orphans. And so ultimately, the what's really compelling is that this movie kind of changed the thinking of the UNICEF executives, and they created a program called the Lion Project that's now gotten 1.2 million kids back to their families.
Wow.
So, those kinds of, I would love to have a lot of those to be reported in shining lights on our website. And here's the impact these things are having. And it's hard to measure the impact of film. It's not as simple as, here's how many clean water wells, and this is how many people got clean water, and here's how much less dysentery we saw as a result. It's more, it takes a much more sophisticated donor and person to understand changing culture, behavior, policy at scale through story. Is not, how do you put a price tag on what Shawshank Redemption did for helping people have hope in the human spirit? Or how do you put a price tag on the empathy that Love on the Spectrum created for people with autism? Or how do you like quantify the value that Schindler's List did to combat anti-Semitism and remind us of the atrocities that man can inflict on one another? These things are too hard at the scale that films are doing.
Yep. I think you said it maybe on the policy level, right? Like that's
It can be a
systematic
great
change is a bit obviously that's a longer cycle,
that can
right?
be a great indicator. Yeah.
That doesn't happen overnight, but when something like that happens,
Yeah.
that's pretty transformative, right? That's
Yeah.
some
Well,
people spend their whole careers trying to change a policy, and if a movie can do it in like 5 years, like that's pretty
yeah.
substantial.
And maybe one day Harbor will have enough money or enough support from philanthropists that you'll be able to do a lot of these measurements and evaluations, and we'll be able to have more like, well, this movie came out about Down syndrome children, and we saw bullying go down by 60%. Those
Mhm.
kinds of, those are all correlation. They can't be really causation that often, but we believe the most powerful thing we do as human beings is tell stories. We believe that at the end of the day, politicians, teachers, bullies on the playground, we're all people and we live through narrative. And if we get told better stories and we believe and buy into better stories and we operate from a better story, the world is a different place. Like if I get on this call and I don't see you, Grant, as this amazing human being who has your own ambitions and goals and desires and like love you as a human that's equal to me, you're gonna feel that. You're gonna feel like, well, that was weird. She just saw me as an audience and she just saw me as a vehicle for her ambition. And you're gonna feel that versus like, us actually having like a
Yeah,
connection and a relationship.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
Thank you
I
for having me.
I knew it would be, but, you stole the show. I appreciate you
Thanks.
taking the time. I appreciate you taking time, and really best of luck to you and the team for
Thank
the next
you.
decade to come.
We need it. We need all the help we can get.